super excited about this talk. I'm now being recorded. Super excited about this talk. AWS has been one of the things that, we'll get into it, but they just have a rich ecosystem of products. And learning how to configure those and make those work together can be a little intimidating. And so we'll cut through a lot of that today. But it's one of those things that many startups use. We'll get into some of the reasons why, but some of that stuff has driven me to really want to learn their ecosystem. And so with that, I want to give a moment for an introduction from Walmart Labs. And then from there, we'll move to the deployment of a React, Mongo, and Express app. It may be 2 parts, depending on the amount of questions. It's definitely not a small amount of slides, but it's a lot of screenshots. So if you guys will bear with me, we can try to knock out both of them. If we do knock out both of them, I've got Medium articles already written that I'm going to post following this, so that'll have more detail on how to go through this stuff if you run into challenges. And then you can always post comments on Medium as well. So that might be the best venue for us to expedite through this. But if not, we'll definitely cover the client, and then we'll do part 2 next month. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Leslie.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the Walmart Labs office. We've gotten a few questions. What do we actually do at this office? And at this office, we have a couple of teams. Our big one is our data foundation team. They do a lot of database and database as service, which is awesome. The other side, we have customer experience, which we do things like people mentioned. We did a new rollout of the website. People looked at our website. I'm very excited about that. A lot of people I talked to were like, yeah, it looks the same, because they hadn't actually been to the website in a while. And also I want to point out our ABA testing team that does a lot of great work, and DevOps team, now that I see you standing here. DevOps, is that what I call them? Automation, testing automation, and other automated things. I don't know what you do. I was actually started on that team, so. I started on that team. Okay, yes. Jun is definitely not DevOps. No one is DevOps. All right, I also want to do a welcome. This is also kind of a co-event with Women Who Code, which, as you notice, we don't have a ton of women, but that's kind of like all events, which is why we have Women Who Code. Everyone's welcome at any of our events for folks who have joined. I think we actually have a few men here who've come through the Women Who Code meetup, and that is perfectly welcome. Women Who Code is mostly about helping women excel in technology, and if you're okay with that mission statement, you are welcome. One quick note about logistics. If you parked in the little parking lot on the whatever side of the building that is, there's like a line and there's some signs that say no parking for Walmart here. So if you parked in a little tiny parking lot and you parked sort of towards that back wall, towards like where the dumpsters are, you might want to move your car. Just a quick note. Our tenants don't like that.
Just on the far side, as you're coming down the fairway, it's the second right is a small.
There's only 2 sides. There's like a little tiny one, and there's one that has like a ton of spaces. So if you parked here, you're good. If you parked in one that is just like a hallway, and you park towards the end, then you probably need to move your car.
So basically, anything
past the sign. There's some signs, and there's a line on the ground. Let's go out and check your car. You and I. Let's do. We'll get started. We can check your car. You're right here. Oh, okay. Okay, awesome. You're good then.
I got this
All right, folks. I think we're all done with introductions, so I'll hand it off to Paul, who's going to do our big presentation.
Okay, following, we're going to do the raffle, and then, of course, networking.
Sorry.
One more.
Sorry, I forgot. Now that you said the raffle. Walmart is hiring, and on the board and on the piece of paper, we're hiring for product managers, designers, software engineers. My team needs an engineering manager, so if you know anyone, those are up there. And after his presentation, like between the raffle, we're also going to have a chance, if anybody else here is hiring, or your company is hiring, have a chance to come up here and, do your pitch. Our pitch is like, we're awesome. We do big things.
Okay, let's start. Okay, sponsor acknowledgement, of course, Walmart Labs. I'm going to fly through this, guys, so we can make some progress on the presentations. IBM, has supported with the WebEx. We also have some goodies we can raffle off that IBM has provided. Andrew Mead, Front-End Masters, Stephen Greider, Tyler McGinnis, and Wes Bos have all donated tutorials. And so those are part of the raffle. Anybody that wins gets to choose from their lineup. So AWS with React Express and MongoDB, the client. So why AWS? We're going to cover that with React. Some prerequisites we're going to want to have out of the way. S3 configuration. So with the client, we're going to do an S3 bucket, CloudFront, and Route 53 configuration. And there we got those guys. And then we're also going to do some configuration with the React app itself to do some automation of the deployment. So why AWS? Well, it's estimated AWS is 10 times larger than the next 14 of its competitors. So it has a huge cloud infrastructure. This was just astounding to me. I think this was a little dated from an article in 2015 that I read that, so there might have been some changes, but still quite a big difference between it and the next 14 competitors lined up behind it. Result, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, so learning their infrastructure will provide long-term benefits. There is a learning curve with them. However, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, so it will pay off. Now, with React, it's designed to run on the client. So there's no reason with React to serve it on a server. Create React app, I should say, the boilerplate that is endorsed by Facebook and Facebook provides, will build your React app into a static bundle. That static bundle can be hosted on what's called an S3 bucket, which is just storage, and read as a static website. So that allows us to really cut down the cost of the React application. Costs are comparable, if not less, so what you're going to find is they're comparable, if not less, on other providers. And many startups use AWS, so your technical expertise can translate into other opportunities. Here's some cost information. It's basically 2.5 cents per gigabyte of storage. Your React app is probably 1 to 2 megabytes, so you could potentially store 1,000 React apps in a bucket before you're going to get over the 2.5 cents. Next, I want to talk about CloudFront and data transfers. So we're connecting this with CloudFront, and that allows us to do a CDN across the globe. It also allows us to do SSL and HTTPS, so that's why we use those two products together. Transfers from S3 to CloudFront are free, so you do not pay for those. You only pay for the information coming out of CloudFront. That is 8.5 cents for the first 10 terabytes, and then it just goes down in cost. But again, given the React app size of 1 to 2 megabytes, you're talking 1,000 requests before you go over 8 cents. So very attractive cost compared to running it on a server, which would not be the case. You would have hourly costs, and those would be more than this. So let's get on to prerequisites. I'm not going to dive into setting up Route 53 domains. That's a one-time setup, and really you're only going to probably do that once if it's your own application, because then you would serve different things on different subs of your domain. So we're not going to cover that. We're also not going to cover creating the certificate with Certificate Manager. This gives you the SSL. Generally, you'll want to do a wildcard when you set these up, and so you could translate that into any other domains you're using. And then the AWS CLI. What the CLI allows you to do is programmatically communicate with AWS. So you're going to want to have this installed on your machine in order to run some of the build scripts we're going to do later. These are all one-time setups, so you generally do this once and then you don't look back. AWS has great docs that cover this. However, if you do get stuck and you can't get through to get these things configured within the docs, they have premium support. It's $100 a month, but you do not have to have it running at all times. So it's kind of like there are other services where you're billed for what you use. You can start it up and stop it. However, I would not recommend making a habit out of starting and stopping their technical support. Top-notch, though. I've used their tech support before, and it's just top-notch. The guys that are behind their tech support really know what they're doing and can walk you through any of the challenges with their infrastructure. So with that, let's get into S3 configuration. This is where we're going to kind of fly through. If there's questions, please stop me, but these are just screenshots, and it's pretty self-explanatory, and this presentation will be made available later. so you guys can walk through this, but I tried to capture every button click and every input that you would go through through deployment. Select your S3 bucket. You're going to see this screen in a lot of cases. This is the admin. This is what can be intimidating. This is what has all the array of AWS products. We're really only going to be using a handful of these, though. So next, we're going to want to select Create Bucket from the S3 admin. We're going to enter a bucket name. This bucket name should be the same as your domain name. They need to match. So whatever domain name you choose, in this case, I choose an example as the sub on my domain. You're going to want to make sure that you have that in your Route 53 as well. Select Next to all these other screens. Select Create Bucket. There is some configuration you could do there with these previous screens. However, all that does is allow you to visit your S3 bucket without going through CloudFront. And we don't want that. You want all requests going through CloudFront. There's no reason to really access this bucket on the web without CloudFront. Select your new bucket. We're going to want to enable what's called static website hosting. So you're going to see this tile here, static website hosting. Select that. Use this bucket to host a website. Select that button. Enter in index.html for the index document and your error. React Router handles not found pages. So generally in React, it's a client-side app. You want to serve your app no matter what. And then you let React Router determine if that's a not found page. Select Save. CloudFront configuration. Select CloudFront. Select Create Distribution. Select Get Started. Select your bucket from the drop-down. So this is a part where there's a few inputs you're going to have to complete in order to get CloudFront set up. AWS has simplified a lot of this, so there's drop-downs whenever possible. That's why I suggest using a Route 53 domain name, because you get a lot of these nice drop-down features where you don't have to enter in things manually. They'll just populate for you. This one, you are going to select your name. You want to restrict bucket access. It's already restricted, but we want to continue that. What these next steps are going to do is create an identity. It's going to create an identity that it will store in your bucket policy. There's a screen we didn't get into that you don't really need to get into called a bucket policy. It has some information about who can access that bucket. This CloudFront admin will just update that stuff for you, so you don't really ever have to get into that. Yes, update the bucket policy. So we want this. And then we also want to redirect HTTP to HTTP requests, so we always serve a secure URL. Scroll down. Now we want to enter the domain name. This is something you do have to enter, so this will not auto-populate for you. So enter that, and then we're going to want to select Custom SSL. If you select default here, you get a secure connection to CloudFront. So you could, by all means, serve your CloudFront distribution with a secure SSL. However, you would not be able to use your domain name, so you would just get some random string that wouldn't necessarily relate to anything. But if you're doing a demo and you don't want to connect it to your domain, you could choose the default CloudFront certificate. Moving on, you would select your certificate here. This will auto-populate. You must establish your certificates in North Virginia. So this was a little strange to me. And in the AWS admin, you have to kind of toggle back and forth between where you're doing your buckets or where you're doing, we'll get into Elastic Beanstalk later, where you're doing these different things to go to North Virginia. So you go to North Virginia, you set up your SSL, and then the other time you spend back in the region that you're working in. But it has to be in North Virginia for it to auto-populate for the products. What's that? I don't know why. That's just one of the stipulations. I found it very odd, too. Nobody could give me, when I did ask, nobody could give me an exact reason why, but there's something about North Virginia in certificates where that's where they like those things. I don't know.
You know, to put it into perspective, those wildcard certificates, you go to some places else, you could spend hundreds of dollars to buy them. And here, I think they're like...
Oh, yeah, they're free. So there's no cost for certificates. And you don't have to use a wildcard. You can set up a certificate for every sub you want to. They're all free.
Yeah, and some people still spend hundreds of dollars to buy them every year. I don't know why.
Yeah, so another benefit of doing the Route 53, you can only do those certs, these SSL certificates, for Route 53 domains. So if your domain name is registered with somebody else, I would highly suggest transferring it in. Their costs are comparable, if not less, than other providers. So I know GoDaddy's big with domain names. You're not going to pay any more to have your domain name with Amazon. Enter in the index.html for your default root object. Select Create Distribution. This is going to load for a little while. It's going to distribute this across the globe. You're free to do other work within configurations here, but if you try to visit the URL, it's not going to be there yet. And that's because it's distributing. This can take up to 15 minutes, but I found it takes a little bit less than that. So we're going to want to select distribution settings. Here we want to configure error pages for the CloudFront. So I know we did that for the bucket where we served up our index.html regardless of what route was requested in the URL. We also want to do that in CloudFront. Select Create Custom Error Response. 403 forbidden is what you're going to want to select here. Enter 0 for the time to live. Custom Error Response, select Yes. And then here's where we identify what we want to serve. We want to serve our index.html. We'll let React Router do all the not found page routing. Select 200 and select Create. Again, your distribution is going to have to update, so that'll take a little bit of time. But now we're ready for Route 53. So feel free while that's updating to head over to Route 53 and start to make these updates. Navigate to it on the admin. Select Hosted Zones. This is where you're going to see your array of different domain names that you have. Select your domain name. Select Create Record Set. Enter in your sub. If you leave this blank, you'll serve the root. You do not need www with Route 53, so you don't need to have that sub. I know some providers, you have to have a www sub. You do not need to have that. You can serve the naked or root domain with Amazon. Select Yes. The alias in the Amazon world allows them to populate this alias target. So you don't have to use an IP address. You can use what auto-populates. So you can easily find your app quickly. You'll want to select your app. You'll want to take note of the CloudFront ID, so that way you know which CloudFront. If you have multiple CloudFronts, you're not going to know which one unless you know that ID. So you might have to toggle back and forth to see what your ID was from your CloudFront. But select the one, and then next, select Create. Now we're going to configure some stuff that's specific to the React application, such as deploy, how we want to handle this. So with deploy, we want to be able to run yarn deploy and then have our app built, sent up to S3, and the last step, we're going to want to invalidate the current cache that CloudFront has, so that way we get this new content. So we have a deploy script that basically uses the AWS CLI, this is where you need that installed, to do a sync. So it's going to sync the build directory with the S3 bucket. You're like, well, where's this build directory coming from? Well, that's where the pre-deploy script comes in. So pre-deploy will run right before deploy. It's going to build the React application. And this is all standard stuff with Create React App. So they have this build command built into Create React App. So all you need to do is really add this AWS sync build. And then after deploy, post-deploy is going to kick in, and we're going to invalidate that old distribution. And we're going to remove the build from our project. We can do it. We can do the API. Okay. This one isn't as bad. So if we made it through that one, this one is actually easier. Why AWS with Express? We're going to cover that. Prerequisites again, initializing a project, environment variables, Route 53 configuration, and Express app configuration. So kind of the same procedure, just with our API. So why AWS with Express? And here's another one of the slogans that has to do with AWS. It's estimated they got a 7-year head start, and that's why they're so advanced, not only with their size, but also with the stability of their infrastructure. So you've got something that you're not going to have a lot of bugs with. This is battle-tested products that they have. The Elastic Beanstalk product coordinates and configures many of the underlying products. So when you use Elastic Beanstalk, you don't have to dive into the 5 or 6 different products that are created from Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is free. So you do not pay for Elastic Beanstalk. You only pay for the services underneath that it configures. Costs are comparable, if not less, to other providers, and Route 53 integrates Super easy. So that just makes it nice to set this up. So the two things you're going to want to take note of when it comes to costs are your EC2 instance, which works out to be about $0.015 per hour, as well as your load balancer. So with Elastic Beanstalk, they configure a load balancer. I highly recommend leaving this in place. If you remove the load balancer, and you might be looking at the cost, well, the load balancer is, 2.5 cents versus the previous one, which I want to say was about $0.015. So it's about another penny more. That adds up over the course of a month. If you're doing just a dev site, you're talking, if it's just your request that you're doing during development, you're probably talking a minimum of $9 a month for the server, and then $20 for the load balancer. If you want your dev site served over an SSL connection under some sub of your domain, you have to have the load balancer. It is considerable amounts of configuration to not have the load balancer, to cut that out. You're basically having to get into the EC2 instance and have a bunch of custom scripts for that EC2 instance to be able to serve an SSL secure URL for just the EC2 instance. So leave the load balancer in place. It takes a lot of configuration out. So with that, prerequisites, Route 53 domain name again, certificate manager SSL, so we talked about that a little bit with the last one. You're going to want to have something set up that you can connect. And then with this, you're going to want to have the AWS CLI and the Elastic Beanstalk CLI. If you set up the AWS CLI, Elastic Beanstalk CLI is super easy. There's almost no configuration with that at all. Not to say the AWS CLI isn't easy. There's just some more things you have to do to authorize your computer to be able to communicate with AWS, where you've kind of already gone through that when you install the EB CLI. So initializing a project. It's as easy as within the root of the project calling EB init. You pass on a flag of platform Node.js and then the region you want. In this case, we use US West 1, which is Northern California. EB create is the next command you're going to run. You're going to give it a flag of sample as well as the name of the app you want to have. What sample does is it uses a Node.js boilerplate that AWS already has, so you have a lot of the configuration for Node already set up on your environment. Next, you're going to see AWS run through a series of commands. And so what it's going to do here is create a few different things. It's going to create a security group, the load balancer, and auto-scaling configuration. So what this will do is it'll scale. If it needs to, it'll start up other instances. So if enough traffic starts hitting your site, AWS will take care of it. And then also the T2 micro. There is one below that called a nano. However, that's designed for microservices and cannot run npm install. So, go ahead. I don't know the thresholds of the scale. I just know that if it gets too many requests, it will start up other servers. And so it'll start up other T2 micros. Yes, there are. You can control how many instances, and you can get into a further configuration. I don't really cover that in here, but yes, there is. As long as you're using the load balancer, you can configure what goes on with the instances and thresholds and so forth. T2 micro is what it's going to default to. I just leave it there. There's obviously bigger servers, but with a node application and the fact that it's going to scale and just start up more servers if you need it, go with the minimum you need in order to get your node application running. So T2 micro. Moving on, you get an Elastic Beanstalk directory. You should exclude this from your project with a git ignore. There's nothing really sensitive in there, but it is recommended you do that. And so add that to your git ignore. Add an EB extensions directory and a file named node command config. You could also do this in the Elastic Beanstalk admin, but here you have control over it in your project directory, and so it's just easier if you're have additional projects later where you're using the same boilerplate, you've got these commands in there. But what this does is just tell it to use npm start. Elastic Beanstalk will run npm install, so we'll get to that a little bit later, but you do not need to worry about it running npm install. It'll do that on its own. Add these settings so it knows what to do. And again, all these files, they're actually on my GitHub, so you can view all of them there. But they'll also be part of the presentation that we're going to upload, so feel free to go back and copy and paste those exact lines if you need them. Environmental variables. Back to the admin, select Elastic Beanstalk, select your application, select configuration, select software, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you're going to enter your environment variables. It does not automatically set node to production, so you're going to want to have that as a key value pair. This is also the place for you to enter your MongoDB URI. Select apply. So it's going to update, and this will take a few minutes. And while it's doing that, let's go to Route 53. So navigate to Route 53. Again, hosted zones. This is identical to what we did with the CloudFront distribution. Select create record set. Enter the sub you'd like to use. Select yes for the alias. Select your Elastic Beanstalk from the drop-down. This tends to be a little bit easier than CloudFront because it does give you the domain that you're using. Where CloudFront just gives you the ID, this you can see a little bit better, so it's a little bit easier to select this guy. Select create, and here's our configuration for the Express app. We're going to need our ARN, and this is the Amazon resource name. What this allows us to do is use our SSL certificate with the Elastic Beanstalk environment. So we're going to head to our particular region. This is where you got to remember, oh, I got to change back. Because if you go to the same region you're in and try to view your SSL certificate, it's not going to be there. So make sure you head back to North Virginia. Select your certificate, select the drop-down, and you're going to see an ARN here. This would be a full string. I've kind of blurred out or boxed out certain stuff that is sensitive, although this is, there's nothing, there's no security issues with this, having this public. I just removed anything that was indicative of my projects. So we want to add a file name in our EB extensions called secure listener config. And what we're going to do in here is add these settings. And again, this is all going to be, it's on my GitHub, and this is going to be part of the files later. So feel free to copy and paste that. But it just identifies our SSL certificate. With this, we've got some more build scripts. So EB deploy is what you use to deploy the app. With my Express app, and I don't know if you guys do the same, but I like to use ES6 and Babel, and I minify it. And so there's some steps that I need to take before I can just throw this thing up onto AWS. And so what I do is I have a build script. I have some deploy scripts. Similar to what we did with the Create React app, we run deploy. Or I'm sorry, yes, we run yarn deploy. That's going to kick off the pre-deploy script. Cool, you can see the cursor. Pre-deploy is going to run npm build and build our directory. You're going to see commands here specific to npm. You can install yarn in your environment. However, with a server, you want things as lightweight as possible. If you install yarn, you're going to be running yarn and npm. You can't install yarn without npm. So I'd recommend just going with npm here. But we're going to kick off our pre-deploy, which is going to build our app. It's going to build it with Babel. You're going to see over here I've got a Babel RC. This instructs Babel what to do. So we're compiling, we're transforming our code, as well as minifying it. So Babel has a great minifying plugin that'll take it and squash it all down. So it's nice and tight. And then we run into a post-deploy, which is just going to clean out that build. You see me do this clean on both the kind of pre-deploy and post-deploy. That's probably not necessary, but I like to do a check in case there is a build hanging out from the last one and clean that out if there is. So after we've thrown this up on Elastic Beanstalk, we're going to, well, before that, I should say, we're going to want to exclude some stuff. So again, we want everything lightweight that we throw up to Elastic Beanstalk. There's no reason to have your Babel RC, your prettier information, any config you have for your local project through VS Code, as well as any config variables, because we configured that in the AWS environment. Also, you don't want your node modules. If you add this config, the EBIGNOR, and you do not specify all the files you want to ignore, it's going to throw them up. So an issue you could run into is if you just add a few here and you don't add your node modules, it's going to throw your node modules up, and then that's going to conflict when it tries to run later on. So exclude your node modules, and of course our source, since we're building all that, we don't want that on Elastic Beanstalk. Run yarn deploy, and it's going to start deploying the project. If you head back to the admin, remember to change your region back. Then you can check your environment. You should have a health okay. If you do not, hit the logs button over here to the left, and that'll bring you in. You can either request just the last 100 lines of code, which is generally all you're going to need, or you can download all the logs, which is a pretty detailed and full log. It'll download a whole file onto your computer where you can go through everything in there. That's needed sometimes if you get into a bug that you can't resolve just with the normal logs. Your application should now be visible. So you'll see this thing in the URL. You'll have the secure URL as well. I want to mention one note here. In my boilerplate, I was enforcing HTTPS, so the secure URL, through my Node app. I've now moved that over to Nginx just to get it a little bit more lightweight. But by default, Elastic Beanstalk does not restrict or redirect traffic. So both your HTTP and your HTTPS URL will be accessible. If you don't want the insecure one, you've got to either enforce that in the Node app, or there's a config file I now have in my boilerplate, so feel free to look at that. That goes through and instructs Elastic Beanstalk to route everything to the secure URL. We did it. With this, I wanted to open up to questions. I know that was a lot of slides, a lot of different processes to get through the whole thing. Again, I'll have all this up in a Medium article, but if there's anything I can help with now, let me know.
What's the rest of your stack? So you got React and you got
So
Redux?
great question. I have Redux in there. I've got React. For MongoDB, I use MongoDB, the open source project, also has a business behind it called Atlas. And Atlas is, if you've ever heard of MLab, it's basically a service where you get MongoDB as a service. The costs are very attractive. It's actually less than running your MongoDB on an EC2 instance through Elastic Beanstalk. And they have free support with it, and their support is stellar. So you get on a chat with them, and they'll not only help you with questions that may be specific to what you're paying for, they'll help you with stuff that's just related to MongoDB. So I highly recommend doing that just so you have access to that information. But MongoDB for the database, Express for the server, and then you saw the kind of the stack I'm using for DevOps. So I use the S3 bucket with the CloudFront for serving of the clients. And with my current business, what I do is I have one API that serves the data for all my different client apps. And then each client app would be hosted on an S3 bucket through CloudFront, and then I feed that data that's needed. And I mean, I feed data down to every level of the style for components. So I basically use Material UI for styling, and then I feed the data on color, typography, anything needed to render those components through the API. So that way I've kind of got one app that can fit many different needs.
You mentioned the Nginx. Are you using
Yes.
Nginx?
Yes, so there's a little bit of configuration I do with Nginx, but not a whole lot. And that's config files that would be within your EB extensions. So in your EB extensions, you can set up some config files to kind of tell or instruct Nginx what to do. that's really the only time you really need to get into Nginx. So really, much of the deployment is just adding those scripts. I mean, the scripts that you're going to see in my boilerplate, there's very little application-specific information. Your certificate through your certificate manager, so your SSL cert, that has a specific information. But all the other scripts, you can just copy and paste and put in another project, and they'll work. So there's nothing specific to your application. That's it? Okay. I'd like to thank you all. Again, I'll get these posted on Medium. Comment, let me know if there's something that could use clarification. This is something I go through a lot, so there might be something that I'm not describing properly because I just go through it so much, I don't know what's needed as it relates to description. And don't be intimidated by the AWS product richness. You really only need a handful of these things. As you saw, they released Elastic Beanstalk. It's been years, but that orchestrates other products. So some of these products that they have, this huge list, are just products that orchestrate other products. So it's just an amazing ecosystem they have. But it can be intimidating. The first time I looked at it, how the heck am I going to do this? But hopefully this will walk you through. I know when I was beginning it, I would have loved something that was this detailed with it because all you have are their docs. And a lot of times their docs are separate docs. They're not one set of documents that all build off of each other. So you're reading one doc that may have some empty spaces between the previous doc that you read. And so it can be hard to put all this together and see what to do. With that, if there's something you need built, let me know. Shoot.
So you just redid all this presentation. When you did it before, how much change was there when we first started to now? It's like
I'll say this. The API was harder because the docs weren't as thorough, I'd say, with the API. With React, I'd say there's probably no docs on React, but Create React app, the boilerplate by Facebook, has just excellent docs. So one of the reasons why React is so great is you've got great docs, you've got tons of articles, and so I was able to put that together through Create React app. They has a deployment section in their docs. There's a Medium article that walks over something very similar to this, so deploying on their system with CloudFront and the S3 bucket. So that helped me. And then, don't be afraid to sign up for their tech support. It is pricey if you just leave it on, kind of like any of their services or any of their, some of their services, I should say. But it is pay as you go, so I would just get a handful of questions you need asked and answered, sign up for it, and then if you're very confident you're done, you can turn it off. I will say I'm with it right now, and I haven't turned it off because I love it. Their tech support is by far the best. So when I said MongoDB tech support was great, Amazon's is even a step above that. And so they can walk you through anything that is specific to their infrastructure. They're not going to tell you how to code something in Node.js. A lot of times their developers don't know JavaScript or don't know Node.js. And so you're going to want to make sure what you're asking isn't something you could solve in your application. It's something specific to their infrastructure.
Yeah, you made some choices there, like using CloudFront. I mean, it's fast.
Oh, yeah.
And you can also add, if it's supposed to be very secure, then you can add web application firewall on top of it, which works with CloudFront. And it will, out of the box, you spend like maybe an hour configuring it, and it will set up all sorts of protection there against hackers, like SQL injection attacks, or like
Oh, yeah.
all sorts of other security prevention. It's like state-of-the-art security then.
Yeah. And, feel free to do microservices. So you don't need to have everything served on your app. Create React App allows you to do dynamic imports, if you're familiar with those. And so you can already split your app up when you build it into somewhat like microservices, but I mean, you could also host different parts of your app on different buckets, and the cost is just negligible. Okay, with that, I'm going to go back to our home screen. I'm going to try, because I want to do the raffle and let you guys decide. All these guys have new tutorials out, so you're not going to go wrong with any of them. I'll say most of the tutorials are probably GraphQL related. Let's see if there's a way I can do this a little bit faster. That's a lot of slides to go through. Uh-oh. Did it do it? Beautiful. Okay. But I know Wes Bos just put out an advanced React one, and I want to say Steve Greider just did something that was full stack React and GraphQL. A lot of these guys are going GraphQL. I'd say that's probably the future. I haven't gone that direction yet, simply because my clients I build and my server I built, and so the GraphQL layer is, to me, is very similar to just doing the express routes. So it's not something I've tackled yet, but it's on my radar. So with that, nobody has tickets, huh? We need to give out tickets. Why don't we do some networking? I'll get tickets out. I know there was also at least one individual that wanted to mention opportunities, and so we'll do that at this point. And then following all that, I'll get back up here and we'll go through the raffle. All right.
Can you please come up to the microphone, because we do have people on WebEx who are watching, so if you want wider coverage. And if anybody else wants to come up.
Hi, company Circadence, based in Kearney Mesa, for those of you who aren't all the way north here, is a cybersecurity firm hiring DevOps engineers. So any of you who know CI/CD, Ansible, Docker, Jenkins, Artifactory, Azure, or AWS, I recognize I'm at an AWS training program, but if you're here because you know Azure, that's cool. OpenStack or Kubernetes, get in touch with me, and I can put you directly in touch with the hiring manager. Or for the people who are listening on the phone, go to Circadence. They're small enough, you'll probably reach the hiring manager directly anyway. So that's Circadence, CIRCADENCE. Very cool local company.
And before we get to the networking part, some of the Walmart folks were like, why are we doing AWS deployment? So I guess I want to explain that. We sent a survey to the community of folks who show up for Full Stack Lunch and Women Who Code and all of these meetups. And this is what people wanted. So when we send out these surveys, we are listening to you. And yeah, we're Walmart Labs, and apparently now I might have some backlash from this. I don't know. It's what the community wanted, and that's what I want to provide. So when we do send out the surveys, please be sure to put in what you want, and don't worry about whatever we are. It's fine. It's fine. I'll have a nice meeting. It'll be great.
We didn't use the word Amazon too much. It was AWS.
Yes.
It's a different division.
I had this discussion already. I had this discussion 5 minutes for like 5 minutes. But anyway, enjoy Fix.
Yes, it was due to popular demand. We sent out the survey. Overwhelmingly, everybody wanted to learn about deployments. And so that's what led us to the IBM deployment last month, as well as this. And so that's kind of what steered it this direction.
Yeah. So yeah, and if you want to see something that we haven't done, you can message whichever meetup that you came through.
We'll probably do another survey. I'll probably try to do those quarterly just to kind of check in and see what people are interested in.
Yeah.
And if it continues to be AWS or deployment in general, we're definitely going to mix it up. So if everybody overwhelmingly wants deployment continually, we are going to mix it up. So I'm not just going to do deployment every month.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And nobody parked in the bad place. There's no cars there, so we're good. Good?
I just have a question regarding, you guys gonna like post this on YouTube?
Yes.
Yes, it gets.
With the help of IBM and Niall over here, we will have the files available on YouTube Actually, though, the video will be on YouTube. There'll be a link to where the files are. I think they'll be is it Dropbox? In Box. And so those files will be there. I'll also have links on that with the Medium articles. Because I felt this was an ambitious direction to go with trying to cover both, but I didn't want to, split it into two parts. And so I'm like, let's just plow through it.
Yeah.
Questions that'll come up, we'll
I didn't
answer
get a ticket.
afterwards. And then again, I tried to capture every button in input, so that way when you walk through this again on your own, you hopefully won't run into challenges.
We'll get a bowl.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we're gonna get a bowl and then we're gonna launch these. Oh, you don't have two though, right? No, you got Mike. That was one. Cool, I appreciate that. Help with it.
I used to run the Final Cut Pro user group, so I know the issue
Oh.
with tickets. Yes, Raffle, there you go. Perfect. Nope, that's
We'll get all these mixed up. That'd be happy.
I'm not gonna help.
That's the key.
Just ready.
Anybody have any feedback? Any of the previous winners maybe have feedback on any of the courses they